Yeah.
Yeah.
We are live.
You're
All right.
live.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, guys.
Norm.
Hey everybody, welcome to the OG LitRPG panel. I don't believe most of these guests need any introduction whatsoever, but I will allow them to present their own introductions anyways, because I've never met them and I don't know who they are.
Who do you want to go first,
Who
Jay?
wants to start?
You got to direct us. You moderate us, man.
You know what?
You
Because you
guide
spoke
me.
first, you go first, Dakota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dakota Krout. All right. Next.
James.
No, I want to hear all of Dakota's glowing accomplishments. Dakota,
Come on,
tell us
man.
about yourself and your awesome books.
I love my books. I love writing. I hope you've seen my stuff. I have something like 6 series out currently. So I have the Completionist Chronicles, Divine Dungeon, Libero Hexer with James. I'm sorry, Wolfman Warlock with James. Just books in my head.
Book 2 coming out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Book 2 is coming out next week. It's pretty awesome. The full Murder Hobo series, which is awesome. The next book is going to be out in the next month or so on pre-order. And final one is the Lion's Lineage right now. So yeah, so that's a different series and a bunch of books in them. So if you guys haven't seen them, I hope you check them out.
Also, he runs Mountaindale, which is a publishing company. In case that was not made known.
I thought I would be subtle with it today.
I'll jump in. I'll do it.
I was going to say James is next.
Hunter. Perfect. Reading minds right here. I'm James Hunter. I'm the author of a bunch of different books. Probably best known for Viridian Gate Online, which is it's a book, and people are stuck in a game. It's great. If you haven't read it, go read Viridian Gate Online. The first 3 books are free through the Audible Plus catalog. If you haven't checked them out, you should absolutely check them out. I also write the Rogue Dungeon series, Bibliomancer with Dakota Krout, the Shadowcroft Academy for Dungeon series with my best buddy Aaron Michael Ritchie. He's so funny and cool. He's watching this, and I'm also contractually obligated to say that every time I talk about him. So, and a bunch of other books, and I also run Shadow Alley Press, which is a game-lit RPG and fantasy publishing company with my wife Jeanette. So that's me.
All right, I'm Aleron Kong. I'm a physician by training, but I have now been full-time authoring for the last 3 years. I write the Land series. There's 8 books in that. I've recently started my 2nd series, God's Eye, so there's 1 there. I'm working on book 9, book 2, and a 3rd series right now. It's been a wild ride. Sold over 1 million copies, became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. My mom still thinks that I should go back to doctoring to keep a real job. And that's basically me. Yeah.
Awesome. So looks like we've already had quite a few comments coming in. A lot of people are saying hi. Different pieces. People are very excited. We got there's already been a couple of questions, but there's a little more specifically tuned towards how do I get published with one of your companies. So we'll leave those out for now, but you guys can pitch that towards the end if you please. We'll launch right into one of the very first questions. What inspired you guys to write in a genre that had little to no presence in the U.S. at the time that you started writing? And we'll start with James this time.
Sure. Hey, thank you for comments. So I have been writing urban fantasy, and I have been publishing urban fantasy and making a living doing that. And I remember I had written and published, I think it was my 3rd or 4th book in one of my urban fantasy series when I had stumbled, and this was back in 2015. So kind of right at the sort of birth of when LitRPG was really getting going. And I remember reading the very first book that I read was Way of the Shaman. And I remember reading it and getting to the end of it and thinking, I am so confused. I don't know what this is. I don't know why it exists. And also, how can I get more of it? Because I am strangely attracted to whatever is happening in this book right now. And I remember being very confused and just binging through Way of the Shaman. And then because Amazon algorithms are king, they recommended me Play to Live by D. Russ. And I remember reading through all that. So I started with the Russians. And then I'm still writing my urban fantasy stuff. I'm reading all this stuff. And I'm thinking, God, this is so weird and also simultaneously so amazing. And then I started to discover the American authors like Aleron, Travis Bagwell were a few of the early beginnings, Luke Chemlenko. Divine Dungeon. I remember reading all these books and then thinking, and again, I'm already like an author who's doing it full time, writing urban fantasy books. And then I remember thinking, I want to write this instead. And I remember having that conversation with my wife, and she was like, so you want to stop writing the thing that pays the bills and instead write books where people are in video games? And I was like, yes. And also there are stats and stuff. And she was like, I don't understand any of the stuff you're saying, but I'm with you, baby. And that was, I mean, it was really kind of this leap of faith of just doing something that called out to me and that I really loved, and it was rewarded. People really liked that. And so I've kind of been doing it ever since. Haven't looked back. Really enjoy the heck out of it.
Cool. Let's go to Aleron next for that one.
When I first found LitRPG, it literally, I felt like the earth was shaking. I was like, corazon, like I cannot believe that I've loved fantasy and I've loved video games my whole life and never thought that they could be sort of put together. And it shifted everything for me. I mean, Vasily was one of the first books that I read too, mostly because the three of us have been here sort of from the beginning. So there were like 5 books for sale. So it's not strange that we read the same books. But yeah, Vasily wrote half of his first book is about mining copper. And I'm like, I can't believe I've been enthralled by this for 200 pages as he mines copper. This is freaking amazing, you know? So for me, I never really had a plan to become a writer. I wanted to be a writer the same way I wanted to be a ninja and a cowboy. Like it was like, yeah, sure, but that's never going to happen. And honestly, even when I wrote my first book, it was more of a psychological exercise. I never really thought anybody would ever read it. But it did take off. I did find my tribe, thankfully. They're amazing. And yeah, so it wasn't like a literary decision for me because I never considered myself a creative or a literary person outside of just consuming the same books that all the rest of us have. For me, it was like I fell in love with this genre and I grew with it, and we were able to make the social media sort of presence with it to, you know, sort of watch it grow. But yeah, I mean, I still love it. It's still insane how much LitRPG, these silly stat books, right, that other people don't understand, Hearts Forever, is just sort of a major part of my life. You know, it's nuts. It's awesome. So, yeah.
Dakota?
Hit me with the question one more time, because I've just been really, really focused on what they're saying, and it's kind of slipped my mind.
You're such a good listener.
Well, it's really interesting stuff. I want to know.
What inspired you to write in a genre that had such little to no presence in the U.S. at the time you began writing?
So, a lot of people so let me back up a little here. I was writing Divine Dungeon, right? So I had been writing it for a long time, and so what actually got me to publish, though, right? Because I was writing it and I was having fun with it, and it was originally kind of like a D&D campaign for me, and then just kind of everyone scattered. So I just kind of had this idea in my head of like, hey, if I'm running this dungeon, and how do I get people interested in coming back and going through this dungeon, so on and so forth. And that turned into writing a whole book. And the funniest thing is I didn't actually know that the genre was out there, right? Because it was so new. And what I was writing, I just didn't realize. But I did one of the worst things that you can do for... Oh, did I freeze?
Oh. Nope. Okay. Still good.
All right. Sorry. So I did one of the worst things that you can do when you're trying to decide how to be a creative writer. I took a college course on creative writing. And so I was in this like super terrible editing death spiral on this book, like trying to make it perfect, all this other stuff. And I got this great piece of advice from my English professor, and she said, "No one will ever read anything you write." And I said, "Okay, I guess my book is good enough now then." So I would slap that button so hard with that publish button. And then, yeah, just a couple of people in the community reached out to me like, "Hey man, this genre already exists. You don't have to be shouting into the wind. You can be talking to people that are interested in it." And I was like, what, that's a thing? And then I got into the genre and I just devoured everything that there was, like everything. It was just so good, you know, just everything about it I loved. Just right up my alley from the get-go. And so I just dove in and I haven't looked back. So that's mine.
it's so clutch what you said. Like, yeah, if you want to be a successful writer, do not listen to people that tell you how to be a successful writer. They create all these walls in your head. I mean, I had the same conversation with Will White. He was like, yeah, I was taking this like creative writing, whatever, and they just cracked all over it and said this will never happen. And he's like, yeah, he's one of the most prolific dudes out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of hate for genre fiction, and I think the LitRPG especially.
So much.
So I go to a lot of cons. I do a lot of reader and writer focused cons, and the way people talk about LitRPG now is the way that people used to talk about romance, right? Like, which is so insulting to authors who work really hard. And it's always like, oh, you know, if you want to be successful, just go write stupid LitRPG books where like people are trapped in a game. Like they a lot of other writers in the outside of our community treat it as like this really easy thing to do, and anyone with half a brain could do it, and they're all above it. And there's a lot of sort of genre snobs that feel that way. And I think that finally, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this, but I feel like finally people are like, nope, LitRPG is the thing. It's here to stay. It's hard to write. There's lots of people trying to do it, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge to be able to tell good stories. And it's not easy the way that people think that it is sometimes.
No, man. Like when people are like, hey, what do you do when you want to learn how to do marketing and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I go and I hang out with the romance group, man. Like, holy cow, those guys can market like nobody's business. You know, like they have to get their books out. They have to be moving. They got to be hustling, man. They gotta get that stuff out there. They had to know their audience. They had to be able to target them and hit them every single time, or else they just can't continue. And so they're really freaking good.
They're so good. They're
romance mafia. You don't mess with them. Like,
do not cross a romance group. Or they will literally cut you. They will come after you. They're gonna go after your Achilles, man. It's bad.
Don't mess with Beyonce and don't mess with romance writers. Like, it's just that they're gonna have a horde of people coming after you. But yeah, no, it's like people have always like sort of crapped on LitRPG. They're like, oh, this and that, and then suddenly, and they don't even have this anymore. But Amazon used to have these top 100 authors in a given genre, and after a year or two, they're like, there's only 100 spots. Why are 5 of them always a LitRPG author? And they still slowly started to get it. But I think one of the reasons that a lot of us sort of old heads in the genre too are still indie is that there was like sort of a thing that was passed around to the various like publishing houses, like, don't waste your time on this ridiculous LitRPG thing. It is like, don't even take their call kind of thing. And then by the time we were like, what are you offering me? Are you joking? Like, do you understand anything about this genre? This is not 1985 anymore. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I remember back in the sort of very early days. This was our first Dragon Con, and it was a group of authors that went in on a table. This was where I first met Dakota. Was at this first Dragon Con, and this was maybe 4 years ago. And I had been relatively successful. I think I had 4 VGO books out at that time. And I remember, I'm not going to say who because I don't want to badmouth this particular publisher, but they're a relatively large publisher. And they came and talked about potentially buying the rights for this thing, and it was like peanuts. I mean, it was insultingly low. It was like hot dog at a gas station prices for my books, and I was like, I don't think you understand how this genre is doing well and has the potential to do even better. And I remember talking to someone who was trying to broker this deal, and this will always stay with me. This person who shall not be named but will be seared into my memory forever said, but James, if you sell your books to them, then you'll be a real author. And I remember thinking, I'm a plenty real author right now. I don't need your validation or your publishing house to tell me I'm a real author. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I have readers that really enjoy my books, and I pay my bills doing it. I don't need any more validation than that. And that was kind of a big me moving away from sort of like wanting that traditional publishing career that I had always kind of kept an eye on out of the side of my head.
Which is also a crazy subculture that most people don't know about, that there's this like real like sharks and jets beef between traditional and indie authors, where it's not the indie authors that are normally pushing it, but traditional authors are like, you haven't suffered, you haven't eaten Spam out of a can in New York while you wait in the rain, and you're like, no, I haven't, and they're like, then you're not a real author. And it's like, well, that sounds horrible.
If I can get to a position that's better than where you are without having to suffer, I think I'm doing the thing that's right. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
like,
yeah, it's nuts.
So I did want to interject real quick. We've had a couple of different questions. One of the more prevalent ones was, what does OG mean? Now, a couple of people popped in with original gangsters, a couple of different comments. I think in this case, we're talking original generation, the original
All
people,
of it, all of it.
the
I mean, it
progenitors
basically
of
means
the genre.
swag at the end of the
old
day.
but gold. I've
Like-
always thought it was old
Yeah.
but gold. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So I did want to reiterate that. Another thing that was brought up a couple of times in here, a surprising amount of people actually were bringing up Dragon's Wrath, which was another very
yeah.
original
Thank you.
series
Super good.
that
Thank you.
wasn't
Yeah.
was never really advertised as lit RPG,
No.
but was one of the early guys.
The old
You know,
gods. There we go.
So I'm so happy you brought that up, because this conversation could not happen without talking about Brent Roth.
Yeah.
When I first started, I reached out to him. We've had several correspondences. He was one of the very, very, very first. Just wrote a really great, fun story. Was a really great guy who helped me in my very early career. And his books are pulled from Amazon now because, unfortunately, we think that he's passed on. But yeah, he was amazing. He was just an absolute killer of early RPG. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then one of the other things I did want to mention, you guys kind of touched on a little bit, is a lot of people had that kind of mentality that what you guys were doing was very easy to replicate, very, very quick to throw in. It was just, you could make a little bit of money and move on. And a lot of people tried. And I'm not going to go into names because, again, we're not looking to attack or bash anyone. But there were some fairly successful authors who decided to write into liturgy, either under pen names or under their main names directly.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those books did fail because they didn't understand the nuances. They didn't see what the people were looking for. Do you guys have any interesting comments about something relating to that? I know most of you were either involved or knew people who were doing that.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I saw pop up here a couple times is, do you read each other's works? And the answer is unequivocally yes.
Yep.
And I still read prolifically inside of the genre, and here's the reason why. Because I love the genre, and I love the books. I mean, I was doing something before I was doing this thing, and I switched, not because I thought there was money in it, because in the very early days, I didn't know there's like that you could make a career out of this. I thought, okay, this is something I'll have to balance for fun while I do my urban fantasy stuff. But I loved it so much, and I loved the idea of it so much that I wanted to do it. And I continue to love the genre. I love the way that it's been pushed, the boundaries it's pushed. I love, the tower climbers and the post-apocalyptic lit RPG. I love the dungeon core stuff and all the nuance, and that we have crafters dungeons. And I love all of the things that are coming out organically. The problem with a lot of those early authors is they did not, or those early sort of like, I'm here for money, is they didn't read the books because they didn't love the genre, and they thought it's romance. I can just write a fantasy book and then I can respec it and put some tables and crap in there, or maybe I'll say it's a virtual reality game and then it's lit RPG. But people who loved the genre knew that it wasn't, and they were like, hey, I know what you're doing. You're transparent, and I don't want you polluting our space with your garbage.
I mean, so he said it so eloquently, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, James and I were playing, I think it was Halo at my house, and this guy was just like killing him, and he's like, you know what? I'm gonna kill you, and wrote like this character that he just kept murdering in his story, which is something that gamers understand. That fury of trying to beat the water level when you're playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, screaming and throwing the controller down, and then getting right back at it. And yeah, like you can sort of smell your own. And so, yeah, there are a lot of people that just came in, didn't understand it, didn't want to do whatever. But also I think that the culture of lit RPG has evolved to really kind of be inclusive. I think one of the things that the fans love is that the authors are accessible, that we, the ones of us that have succeeded do respond when someone reaches out, and we do try to actually connect. And there are a lot of people in the literary space that don't necessarily have either the social skills or the mentality or the wherewithal to do that. And I think that makes them suffer as well. Each of the three of us and some of the other people that have sort of come through have an actual love of the genre. And I think it comes across on the page. But it was also, we were there when the first dungeon core was written, when Shamir really leaned in on town building for the first time, and it's just like, oh, dude, that's awesome. And I think seeing how each of these things is its own genre now, right? And seeing how that's developed, you're just sort of like, wow, that's something I didn't even necessarily expect, but oh my God, I can't believe it's been this number of years and I was there at the ground floor kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that actually leads into one of the next questions I wanted to bring up, and that was, since you guys are some of the first, how did you come up with your systems, and what effort did you go to make them unique or help them stay unique? And that was one of the questions that came from one of our Discord folks into the channel earlier.
I think Dakota should answer first because Dakota's system builds more than anybody that I know. I mean, he's got fat stacks of spreadsheets. So I'd love to hear from him
man.
first.
So I really like setting this. I really like setting the system up first so that I can't break the rules. Right. I really feel like kind of a, if you have to break the rules, then unfortunately the book, you kind of, it just feels like lying to the readers to me, and so like I really like to set it all up ahead of time and make sure that it's all ready to go. I would say that one of the things that I do that I don't see many other people do, but I'm trying to get more people to do this, is I create personality models for all of my characters, right? So any character that is going to have a name and be a part of the story is going to have their personality model. They're going to have their own goals. They're going to and basically we're just going to see how they grow and have that done in a way that's psychologically accurate so that I can, have people relate to those characters at a much deeper level. One of the things that's the hardest for me is when I'm reading the story and you get this great collection of all these new characters and they have such cool, unique things, but all of them just kind of go and do whatever the main character says. They're just add-ons so that the main character can have an additional power in all reality, right? And so like if you don't have someone who like challenges your characters and does things or just leaves because they don't like how things are going, like how many times have you seen a party break up because we're like, no, I'm gonna go get married, man, here I'm out. Like I've seen that happen like 8 times in D&D groups. Why does it never happen in stories? And just stuff like that. So from character all the way down, like I do what I set up is when I'm start doing a new story, what I like to do is I call them open formula skill trees, right? So they're open formula in the sense that you can put in something here, and so long as it follows the rules of that level or that tier or that stage, whatever it is, you can use it, right? If it breaks it, if it's too powerful, it has to be at a different stage where the rules allow for it, right? And so it's just one of those things that it's pretty neat. It's really, really hard to understand without access to spreadsheets or PowerPoints. And so I don't go out and like show that about because people just look at it and kind of get this glazed thing going on. Yeah.
Unless you're part of the tribe, man, and then you're like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I want to plug some numbers in and play with your system.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've seen the back end of it, and did you feel like, hey, this is something I can just hop right in and use?
No, I would not say that. I would say that it's definitely like, because I also sort of have spreadsheets and I build out my systems, but Dakota's tracking models and the systems, Dakota comes from a coding background, and it shows when he's building out his systems. I do not, and that also shows when I'm building out my systems. But I will agree with Dakota that and I think someone mentioned, I think it was Zachary mentioned in the comments that it's a hard magic system, right? That's exactly right. LitRPG, in my mind, is the hardest magic system in the sense that it's the most rigid, because you cannot. That's the number one rule. You cannot build a mechanic and then break it. People want to see you work the system, and when you start to set up rules for yourself and you contradict them, I think that's a big part of what drives people away from poorly written LitRPG books. They might be good in other ways, but I think that can be a major deciding factor for other people. I will say for me, when I'm designing a story, usually I need to have a story where there needs to be a compelling reason why game mechanics need to exist. I want the game mechanics to be integral to the story. So I don't want it to just be, hey, here's a random fantasy world where game mechanics exist. I want a compelling reason for the game mechanics to exist, because then it becomes a character in the story. And after I figure out that hook, why this game system and this story marry each other in the most perfect union, then I can figure out how that system is actually going to work to tell the most compelling story possible, where the game system plays a major role and a major function inside the series and inside the books as individual units.
Yeah, I mean, I think they basically said most of it. You've got to be accountable. Everyone hates when you're following along with the story and you're like, how's he gonna get out of it? And then he pulls out some random magic item that has never been mentioned before, and you're like, well, that was a waste of the last month of my life reading all these books. This sucks. For me as well, like, I always love the grind of games when I'm gaming. So like, I always have to build into any magical system that I do, like, what are the accountability? What are the things that are going to keep from doing it? What are the things that are going to, even though you seem very powerful, can counteract that a little bit more, so that you're not getting to the point where literally it's just a Superman, Mary Sue kind of thing, where there's no real challenge. It's always going to sort of come together. There's no consequences to it. And also, I love what James was saying, that there's got to be a reason behind it. One of the main things for me is that when I was creating my first system, that even though there's like just all these different magic systems in my books, the affinity system, that people are born with a certain ability to be good at some things and bad at the others, was very important to me, because that's sort of part of my world view. I don't think that everyone can do everything. It doesn't matter how much I study particle physics, I'm never going to be at Stephen Hawking's level, right? Mm-hmm. Most of us can do most things, but the idea that the world is not fair is something that's very in keeping with the true world. And I think it makes it a lot easier for people that are reading to see themselves in these characters when it resonates more with something that's actually true, as opposed to the forces of good always triumph over the forces of evil kind of thing, because it's better when they don't, because that is a better story.
And so I'll touch on a little bit of this, because I've worked with all three of you in different levels, without violating NDAs. I've seen most of your guys' backgrounds for how you do some of your works, as well as a lot of others. And some people go as detailed as creating a full detailed world guide where other people could literally pick it up and start writing in their universe almost immediately. And some go a little more nuanced in that some of the more minute details are blocked and hidden and done out, and you need some guidance if you were going to go further into those worlds. But all of you guys have done an excellent job of balancing your systems and keeping them both relevant as well as detailed and balanced in a multitude of ways, in that you don't just gain powers instantly. You have to work for them. And then there's a balance as to why someone who suddenly gets a pretty cool skill can't just take over the world instantly and, move on to everything. So I did want to give you guys all kudos on that. You've all done a really good job with that. And it's something that it's really fun to see, especially as things progress and more people start writing. I think James is the only one here who has the full shared universe, although Dakota has a couple of people writing and some stuff now.
Arturian Archives is definitely shared universe. Yep. And he and I Wolfman Warlock series takes place inside the Completionist Chronicles universe. So Dakota's definitely stepped into those waters a little bit. And I know he intends to do so more. I won't say anything more on that, but I know that is something that's on the horizon for him and is an agenda item, and for me as well.
Yeah, I've had a series that I've been working on for 2 years, specifically so that I can release the majority of it within a year. And then the big point of that book is actually what part of the reason, or big thing in that series, one of the reasons it's taken so long, is that I have been building, World Bible out with it, so that I can hand that to an author and say, go ahead and just write a trilogy, man. Like, just pop in there, follow the rules, and go, right? And that's something that takes a lot of effort and testing, because I understand the system really well, but when I hand that over to someone and they're like, "What is this? What is this?"
I was trying not to get specific because
No, and it is hard. I mean, that's one of the things I love. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. No, I love collaborating. I think that, and someone had brought up earlier in the comments that the fan author interaction in this community is great, and it is hands down better than any community I've ever seen. And that's really that's part of what has enabled me to continue to do what I do year over year. Because honestly, writing is a lot of writing is tedious. You sitting behind your computer screen for months at a time, talking to no one about anything, and just like, I'll write my book, hopefully people don't hate it, and then just like casting it out into the world and like, let's see. It can be a really lonely, solitary pursuit. So being able to talk to fans and readers and get real-time feedback is so helpful and is invigorating for me as an author, but then also collaborating with other people, talking with other authors, being able to bounce ideas off of each other, come up with cool ideas. And that's one of the things that I love the most. And that's why I do so many collaborations, is because it helps me stay fresh. And that's something I would love to see more of going forward in this, like in LitRPG as a whole. And why I'm really excited for what Dakota's doing is because there's these really big, awesome universes that have so much potential to be explored. And I know that, even in my own universes, I could never explore all of the nuances or all of the continents or all of the classes or all of the quests that are available. So the idea of seeing more shared content is really exciting for me. And I'm really pumped to see, more of that continue and what Dakota is going to do with that in the future as well. Aleron, do you have any plans to ever lean in that direction? Or is that,
so I get that.
Nope, this is my baby.
I get that question all the time. So I love that my personal literary success has been able to grow analogous to LitRPG growing, and that's partly because of the social media group and everything. And I'm happy, and I'm so happy that LitRPG has grown because of those efforts, and it took a lot of man hours to sort of pour into that. But oh my God, that has been the most massive headache, running into the various personality styles that I was going to be like Choice, but no, just like the narcissistic assholes that I've had to butt up against throughout the years, that it kind of left a really sour taste in my mouth initially, with sort of having that leap of faith and that trust for something that's so integrally personal to me to sort of bring in. Now, I mean, there's people that I trust, like I would, happily write with you. I'd happily write with Dakota. There's other people that I know would be amazing in my universe, but it was such a strange sort of thing. I thought that when I first became a writer, I would be having discussions about Descartes and Voltaire, and it'd be this, enlightened whatever. And it's just a bunch of mean girls in high school, sort of flinging stuff around. Even the topic of like keeping things sort of fresh and having like a very detailed magic system that other people can use. That was something that got a lot of hate for me initially, because I made sure that the group was reader focused as opposed to writer. And like we said, there were a lot of writers that came in and like, hey, I see you guys are making money. And they would come in and be like, what exactly do you like about these books so I can regurgitate it out and I want to make this money and da-da-da. And then saying no did not engender a lot of love for me in various literary circles. So the idea of expanding it out, yes, it is very personal. It is very whatever. I could see it potentially happening. And I created my own universe, honestly, with the Star Wars universe sort of as my guiding light. It's like you can have various two worlds that have plot lines that intersect at one time. It can be completely separate. This over here can have a different magic system. But I don't know. I'm still just sort of not there. And my own literary journey has sort of guided me to, I kind of view myself as I built this kingdom that I love. And you guys are out there empire building, which I think is just absolutely amazing. I am in awe of what you guys do. But I'm like, God, that's got to be a lot of headache too. I mean, it's amazing, but then I'm also like, no, but I'm just sitting here typing.
You're not wrong. There are days, usually once a week, where I will stand in my closet upstairs with no pants on, getting ready for my day, and think, why did I do this to myself? Why do I allow people to have any influence on me? I should just go back to being a hermit. I should just write my own books and ignore everybody else in the world. And that's all I'll do. And I'll be happy and content. And there will be no headaches anymore. And like once a week, that is a conversation that happens in my head. And then I'll talk with an amazing author that's, in Shadow Alley or whatever. And I'll just think, oh, that's right. Because I like helping people. I like seeing great stories come to life. I like being able to fund books that I would want to read as a reader, and that I know that author wouldn't be able to put out on their own because they can't afford cover art and they can't afford editing, or maybe it needs a little developmental edit work, and I can pour into that, and I can pour into that author and sort of see them come to life and see them grow. That is rewarding. but you ain't wrong. The number of headaches, especially in shared universe building, are legion.
Yep. I mean, they say that common sense is the most widely shared commodity in the world, because every person is convinced that they're well supplied with it, right? And so when you sometimes just having conversations with people is enough to know if you're going to work with them or not, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that I really like the people that I choose to work with, and I have very little negative to say. Every step that I've taken in my life has led me to where I am, and I'm very happy with where I am. And the people that I work with, and also sometimes I would like to just vanish without a trace. Just the thinking that best way to live a life well is to live it unseen, right? But with at the same time, with what we do, being public figures and growing our industries and growing our our individual companies, whatever it is we're doing, it's really hard to not be public. It's really hard to not need to have that personal growth and be able to do things that move you out of your comfort zone and into your growth zone, right? I'm saying a lot of things, and I'm really beating around the bush on this a lot. But
you make
really,
words good. I like it.
It's awesome. So. Like what we do is awesome, and I'm trying to find a good way to vocalize that. So words hard, people cool. You guys are great.
Dakota is a master at finger words, is what he does.
Words well with my hands.
He needs the coffee going into his body in order to communicate. Awesome. Do you guys? I don't know. I've watched all of this from the very beginning, and I've watched everybody grow their different paths, right? Like all three of you guys took a different direction into what you wanted to do. With James and Dakota having a similar branching path, but not the same. You guys both did some very different things.
Yep.
And it's great to have watched how you guys have grown and how you've adjusted and changed. And it's amazing to see how you all approach it. And a lot of the people don't get to see the communication that goes on between some of you guys in terms of not just networking, but like how you do some of your business decisions, what you've learned, your pain points, how you guys try to avoid them. You guys talk about the mean girl syndrome and that how hard it can be being an author and dealing with others. But I did want to reiterate that you guys have found to a good extent, at least with each other and a larger group of various authors, like as Aleron calls it, his tribe. And it, like watching you guys interact is actually really meaningful from a fan perspective, because knowing that it's not just business, that it's something you guys enjoy, that it's something you guys take away from, and that has helped you all move forward is really rewarding from our sense as the people who kind of monetarily support some of your output, whether that's through Patreon or buying your books online or any of the other methods that we do. But it's been pretty awesome to see that as it goes.
Well, yeah, I mean, we like talk. I mean, we're all busy, but we find a way to like touch base every 2 to 3 months, whether it's talking about, Dakota's 9th kid, or, we're talking about business, or we're just shooting shit about LitRPG or anything. I mean, we're all busy, but it's also, I think, because we all came into it pretty much like with an open heart and open mind. We were like, hey, let's make something really cool. And that's not a personality. I mean, it sounds like a very basic thing that you would like to describe about every human being. And that's certainly not something that's endemic to everyone, definitely not in the writing community. Honestly, medically speaking, I feel like there's a preponderance of personality disorders that are attracted to the author lifestyle. I mean, I honestly believe that. But it's also just a very simple thing that when we started writing, we never saw each other as like, well, if they buy your book, James, they're not going to buy my book. And just removing that made it really simple. And it's so true. I mean, I was talking to Michael Anderle about it like forever ago. And he's like, yeah, man, anyone that thinks that your competition with other writers is an idiot. Your competition is hot girls on Friday night, weed, Netflix, HBO. It's anything that people are enjoying. We are giving enjoyment. And so it's not a zero-sum game. And yet that very simple statement is something that will never penetrate some people. So just having normal, good people, it's not hard to make some real relationships as the year goes on.
Part of the reason why we do so many cons is to help writers, and that's actually how Dakota and I met. And it's always a funny story, because here's the thing: I never have any fear of going out and telling people how to be successful in this business. And the reason why is because even if you have all the secrets, you have to do the work, and the work is hard. You have to sit, you have to write books. You have to everyone here has written a lot of books, and writing books is not easy, and writing books that people want to read is even more difficult. So I'm always an open book, and I'll tell anybody, this is what we do. This is our success. I remember the very first Dragon Con, I had done a panel on how to be successful as an indie author who's coming into it for the first time. And I remember getting done with that panel, standing around, and there were probably 15 authors around me asking me questions, follow-up questions after the panel was over. And Dakota was one of them. Dakota had released Divine Dungeon. It was doing well, but he hadn't exploded yet in the way that he has now.
I had the first 3 books out at that point.
Yeah. And so he comes up, he introduces himself. He's like, hey, I don't know if you know me, I'm Dakota Krout. I was like, of course I know you. I've read your books. I love your books. And we get talking, and he's asking a lot of the same questions that these other people are asking. And I gave him the same answers that I gave everybody else. And next year I went back to Dragon Con, and of that 15 author group, only one of them came back. And only one of them had changed their life in that year, and that was Dakota Krout. Because Dakota Krout did the work. He listened to the advice. He was coachable, and he said, I'm going to apply this stuff. And he took it, and he ran with it, and he has built something that is big and huge and sprawling and amazing based off of good stories. But that's because he had this mind frame that, hey, I have to put in the work. I have to do the effort. I have to build those relationships, and I have to continually put out good content. And that's a huge part of his success. So that interconnectedness between authors is a beautiful thing, and part of what makes our community so great.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to throw
I'm
into one of our.
Give you a cosign sign that you can hold up, Dakota. Periodically, it's like word.
I mean, there's no reason to try and compete. He says exactly what I would say were I more vocal. So yes.
Dakota saying don't let him give you that. Dakota is so incredibly eloquent.
He's so gregarious. Yeah, he is. He's just always like the puns that he writes in his books. That's literally how he lives his life. It's just all the time. Yeah,
it is nonstop, 100%. Yep.
So one of the next questions that I did want to get into is where do you see LitRPG going in 5 years? And we'll start with Dakota this time, so that he gets to vocalize his entire answer in whole.
Oh man, no, I mean, up. I mean, absolutely. It's gonna keep going up, and the reason for that is multi-part. Obviously, more authors coming in, doing more awesome books. The authors that are currently in, expanding upon their work and maybe starting new universes, all this other stuff. But essentially, if we're looking at it from a more of a business perspective, there's a few big things that are coming our way, right? For instance, we're getting a library code, right? So so we're getting a actual category.
It's called a bisect code?
Yeah, bisect code. So we're getting a bisect code, and the Amazon's structure, for finding books and stuff, goes off of that bisect, right? So it goes off of that, it chooses the categories. So we're going to have, whenever it gets put in, we're going to have our own actual categories where we're going to have people that, all of our authors, all of our books are actually going to start being linked together. And we're going to start being able to just go into our genre on Amazon and find it. I heard a story from someone who I really trust on this stuff. James knows him as Mark. And Mark was telling me how there's an author that he knows who was making something like $250,000 a year, which is great money as an author. It really is. And she was doing super well. She was, putting out books really regularly. She got a category for her actual, series, her actual content. And she had her first $1 million month, right? Because people can find the books, right? They don't have to search under steampunk. They don't have to search
cyberpunk.
And so just being able to find it is a massive part of it. So there's that. And then the other thing is that the generation that's coming up and kind of coming into their own right now are gamers, man. Like they have been gamers, and they kind of have that mentality of watching streaming stuff, like watching other people play and going in and doing this stuff. So like when Free Guy came out, I actually got to go and see that in theaters with James, and we walked out of there just like shaking with excitement. And we're like, oh my God, get Ryan Reynolds on the phone right now. I've got a great thing. Let's do this, you know?
Yeah.
And like, it's like, that's my book. That's basically my book right there. Right. And it's like, so all of that stuff is just pointing towards more people bringing us into what will become the mainstream. Right. Yeah. And so once we become mainstream, once we become findable, once we have people, you know, that are in influential positions talking about us, like Aleron said earlier, you know, like all of it, like one of the reasons Free Guy was so popular was the streamers that are in the movie are actual streamers in real life with massive followings, and they sent all their people. They're like, hey, I'm in this movie, go check it out. Right. Yeah. And imagine how that would affect us in our genre if we could get a whole bunch of people doing that. And that's kind of what is happening. Right. So that's just business side of things. And, you know, in the writing side of things, like the quality of writing in 5 years has gone amazing. Yeah. Right. Like there's only so much you can read where people don't edit or they don't do whatever. They have terrible covers, whatever it is. And now we look at that and I'm like, man, these guys are working. They're working really hard to make it the best that they possibly can. People that have been around a while are doing amazingly. And like, I know that people working with me like are able to get like really high quality art that they couldn't, because they're like, hey, how do you get this art? I'm like, well, yeah, that's my German artist. And, you know, do you know how to speak German? Do you know how to go through the German repositories and like reach out to those people in Germany, you know, the Philippines, wherever it is, whoever it is, who's the best person for the job. Right. Yeah. Like, how do you know how to find the best person for the job, for narration, for all this other stuff? And a lot of the times now the answer is yes. And it's awesome. You know, like people can go out there and just do amazingly. And you can ask any of my authors, the first thing one of the first things I talk about with them is like, are you sure that you want to be an independent author like in Mountaindale? Are you sure you don't just want to be self-published? Because you can do it yourself, you know? Yeah. And I push them like, hey, if you want resources, I have this great spot for you. It's shadowalleypress.com/writing resources. I sent so many people to your website, man.
Thank you, Dakota. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Like, oh man, it's good stuff. But hey, it works. Like, I don't want to just like steal that webpage and like put it on mine. I'm like, yeah, it's already there. They did it first. Go there. That's fair, right? But yeah, I mean, just stuff like that. I see the genre going up. So the question was, where do you see the genre going? I see it going into the mainstream. I do. 5 years. I mean, it's been 5 years now. And that was what, 2015, 2016? Yeah. Self-publishing as an industry started in essentially 2011, right? We've been going for half the time it's been possible to do it, right? Yeah. There's no way we will not be mainstream at some point here soon, just with the absolute numbers of people that we have, the absolute quality that we have, how we hold at least 5 spots in the top 100 books on Amazon year round, and we have for like 5 years. You know, the fact that we're not already mainstream is already kind of shocking. So I'm just waiting for that to hop in, because it's gonna happen. That's where I am. So anyway, that's my answer, Jay.
Thank you, James, Aleron. Either of you guys have something to add? I mean, you guys were complaining he wasn't speaking enough before, so.
No. I mean, Dakota summarized it really well. I think quality has improved significantly. I think that's going to continue to be an upward trend. Early on, pretty much any book that got the core concept of LitRPG had a chance to do really well. Now, the question is visibility, right? Your book is competing, and again, we're not in competition with other authors. We're in competition with other media. But the reality is that if you have a book with a great cover that's well edited, and a book with a great story with a terrible cover that's not well edited, chances are, if readers have to choose between the two, they're going to choose the one that has a good story, has a good cover, and has editing that's not going to throw them out of the story. So I think that the the quality of writing and the quality of the products that we're putting out as a community is going to continue to improve. I think that that's going to continue to push us into the mainstream. I think that our market saturation is still tiny. We have a very, very vocal, engaged fan base. But for me, I think that LitRPG has mass appeal to people that don't already know about it. Sci-fi readers, epic fantasy readers, high fantasy readers, all of those people are going to enjoy this once they discover it. And that's been a big part of our push at Shadow Alley and my personal push over the past 2 years. And part of the reason why we do the cons is to try to bring readers who have never heard of LitRPG or GameLit into the fold and show them that, hey, you already like most of the stuff that we're doing, and there's more of this kind of stuff that you would really enjoy. So trying to broaden that. I think Dakota's right that eventually, I would say that in the next 5 years, we're going to see the first indie GameLit or LitRPG movie or television adaptation. I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the 3 people in this group right now that get one of those deals. But I expect that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a TV or movie adaptation come out of the community. I would not at all be surprised if we see big traditional publishing, Tor, Simon & Schuster, Random House, take a very serious look at acquiring current indie LitRPG books. My main concern with that is that they will not understand it and that they will try to recruit authors that are not GameLit and LitRPG authors to write LitRPG for that BISAC code. And they're going to release books that are not in any way going to be indicative or representative of our genre. So I do worry about that a little bit. But we'll see how that goes. And I also think that it's possible that over the next 5 years, we're going to continue to see a rise in GameLit and LitRPG small publishing companies like Mountain Dale, like Shadow Alley, like Athon. And the reason why is because I think that it is becoming increasingly more difficult to break out inside the genre because you do need excellent covers, you do need excellent editing, and all of that stuff's expensive. I also think that the audio narration piece is a huge segment of why our books have been as successful as they have. And also, making those connections and funding those books is really expensive. If you get a top tier narrator, it can cost you anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to produce a single book. So it's very expensive for someone who's just starting up. So that's kind of where I anticipate seeing things going over the next 5 years. Could be totally wrong. I hope I'm not.
Agreed.
Yep. Listening to him is like someone random listening or looking at one of my spreadsheets because it's such good information. It's super well formatted, but there's a lot of it.
I'm so sorry. All the time. I
love it. Man, seriously.
I do.
I feel like everyone on here, including our wonderful moderator here, is an amazing resource for anyone that wants to become a LitRPG author. James impressed me with his business savvy and understanding of a longer term view of how to be successful from the very, very beginning. Dakota and his just chutzpah and moxie and wonderful rosy cheeks is somebody that you could look at his model and just be absolutely, absolutely inspired about how, even if you didn't want to bring people under your publishing, just how to have that dogged pursuedness of creating something and devoting your life to it. And honestly, Jay knows every single person who's ever been involved with LitRPG ever. And he's been there from like day 2, day 1 and a half, the second minute that it ever appeared. But yeah, I mean, just look at the fact that when we found it, there were a dozen books for sale in all of the Western world.
I read all of them.
Yeah, we all did several times.
Yep.
And some of them were barely English, let's be honest. And now there's thousands of books. There's hundreds of authors. It's just exploding. People will randomly work into social media conversations. Hey, did you read this LitRPG, blah, blah, blah. And there's very seldom someone's like, oh, well, what's that? It's just part of the lexicon these days. So yeah, I mean, sky's the limit.
Just an anecdotal follow-up. So we did DragonCon this year. And DragonCon attendance was down by 50%. So it was 50% less attended than in previous years past, and we still had an amazing turnout. In years past, we would have people come up and maybe a couple of them had read our books or already was familiar with our works and would ask for a signed copy. But the majority of them didn't know what Gamelit was, didn't know what LitRPG was, wasn't aware of us, and we would have to sort of give them the pitch. This year, when we went back, it's been 2 years because they canceled last year, but this year, I would say 65% of the people that came to our booth, and we had a record-breaking year. We did over $10,000 in sales over DragonCon. So that's our biggest year ever at DragonCon. And over 65% of those people who came already had read one or more of the books that we had published. Some of them had read all of the books that we had published. We had trouble selling them new books because they had already read so many of them. The number of people who I had to tell about LitRPG was minuscule. I think that we are getting serious market penetration, and I think that it's really starting to seep out into other places where it hasn't before, and I'm excited to see that.
So I will take this opportunity to give you guys a small warning. We are coming up on our time slot here, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I did want to also give out the giveaway code word to make sure that people are catching that. And the code word for this one is the LitRPG. And so I know we're about to see that spammed through chat a bunch of times, but and yes, that is a ton of alcohol behind me. I've seen a couple of questions on that. I'm in an apartment. I am between houses currently as I'm moving and building my new house. As Jay Boyce says, it is my editing supplies. This is what I do in order to continue helping some of the authors I work with. Some of these people like to torture me. They send me some terrible, terrible things and ask me to read it.
Jay's
they don't actually publish those
pile right now. He's reading our slush pile because we just finished our open submissions call, and he's been helping us weed through all of the submissions.
Oh, those have been done for a couple of days, man. You're behind the times.
We got some more coming your way.
Check your Slack messages.
Hey! Don't
want to be judged right now, Jay. I'm enjoying our time together.
Don't threaten James like that. Come on now. Can I say? Oh, sorry. I was going to say one thing about DragonCon. If I have a second for that.
So actually, what I was going to touch on very lightly as well is there's been a bunch of questions in here about people asking what the next big LitRPG in-person event that they expect to be. And I know from my experience, that's usually DragonCon is where a lot of us get together. So I did want to touch on that pretty lightly, but go ahead, Dakota.
Oh, just kind of in keeping with what James had said. When we got to DragonCon, like most of a really good chunk of Mountain Dew Press authors had shown up. And we walked in to the panel hall, like to the track rooms. And I found out that like over 100 panelists hadn't shown up. And so I just walked in with a group of my authors and just was like, hey, do you guys need panelists? And like, yeah, we're going to have to shut panels down if we don't have people. And I'm like, tell me who you need. And so we just filled up panels across DragonCon, just like Jay Boyce had like 17 hours of programming that she was on during that time, right? So just a huge takeover. So I mean, that's just another thing. Like, hey, that we were not expecting that, but we were able to walk in and introduce this genre to probably literally thousands of people just because we went.
Thousands, I would say.
Yeah, like Ryan was on a ton of panels too. Like and they didn't show up as guests. They didn't show up as anything. Like they just were like, hey, can I be on panels? Do you guys need panels? And they're like, oh my God, please. Yes. Boom. It was awesome. It was amazing. So, and now we have an in for next year, right? So, yeah.
I was gonna say that was another thing that I did notice this year is the acceptability for the authors from our genre to become panelists on a much broader spectrum was so much more sought after. Not even just because they were having difficulties finding people, but even before that, the amount of people that they had from the LitRPG community that was doing different panels was already higher than I'd seen before. Mm-hmm. And they were even looking for other people to do moderation, to do different things. I was actually surprised at the effort that seemed to be to bring more people from our genre into the front of DragonCon.
I think that's because people in the ivory towers, the big publishers, they don't realize what's happening on a grassroots level, but people like track directors, they do, because they're talking to fans, they're talking to readers, and readers and fans are talking about what we're doing. They're talking about things that are related to our genres, and that the track directors hear those things, and their goal ultimately is to sell tickets and to get people to attend their panels. And so they're going to bring on the authors that they think are going to be able to draw those crowds. And so I think that's why we're seeing more and more track directors and con directors reaching out to authors like us and authors in our community, because they know that on the reader level, it's an enormous draw.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I was on a panel with Sanderson and Butcher, who need no other introduction, right? But I mean, like, a massive part of the people that were in the audience were there for me because, yeah, we are connecting a lot more. And, you know, traditional publishing turns about as fast as the Titanic, and honestly, I think that it's suffering for it now. But it's almost like, and I mean, it like the space no longer necessarily needs it. Like, you're not going to be in Barnes and Noble, and it's like, well, who even knows where there's a Barnes and Noble a lot of times these days anymore? It's kind of crazy.
Was closed down throughout all of 2020 where I lived. You know, like,
right?
It didn't help any author. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the future is just going to be more of us creating more stuff for us. And then there's going to be people like Tor is going to be like, hey, can we come to LitCon? Hey, can we hang out at your such and such? Hey, Dakota, we need more authors. Can you hook us up with that? I think that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think we are now past our time frame. So I'm waiting for Geneva to like pull us off with the king.
I real quick, I do want to say thank you guys so much for organizing this. I know how much of a headache this has to be for all of the folks that are like running this show. And you guys are just amazing. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk and hang out with my buddies. I love you guys. I love all the readers and the communities that showed up to support us. Thank you guys for making LitCon happen. And I would love, I mean, I love DragonCon, but I would love to see LitCon happen in person, and for all of these great authors and all of these great fans to have a place that is literally just our own thing, doing our own thing. So if that's what people love, and all of the fans and readers that are watching this are like, oh my God, I need more of this, and I need it in person so that we can get drunk and play Dungeons and Dragons together while you talk in weird voices, like, let us know.
And magic.
Because, man, do I want that to happen.
We've never done that before.
It's absolutely going to happen. No, I mean, it's absolutely going to happen. I feel like this is, I mean, and honestly, when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, what are the different panels? And I'm like, well, it's got to be one with me, Dakota, and James. That has to happen so that we can sort of like, you know, vibe out. But no, I mean, you guys are amazing. You guys are awesome. And again, shout out to Jay.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for moderating, man.
Definitely needs to be an OG up in here. Yeah.
Sweet.
No, good things.
That's right, David. Big Zog can play D&D. He was at our retreat. He knows what happened.
I was gonna say he was there last time we did that.
Yeah.
He remembers Chortle. I played as a character called Chortle the Turtle. He's like this drunk, wizened old man who just harasses everyone in the game. It was a lot of fun. Very memorable night. My buddy Aaron Michael Ritchie was there playing a paunchy, balding bard who sings rock ballads, and man, the amount of shenanigans we got up to, amazing.
Absolutely.
I guess we keep waiting for Geneva, but